welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to go over this article in the New Era, October 1985, by Joseph F. McConkie. It's called, "What are the most important events that must take place before Christ returns?" I'm going to be going over this. I'm going to go over some what I think is very interesting things about Muslims converting to Christianity. I had heard before that there are many that are converting because of dreams that they're having, and my friend from Spain, Daniel, he sent me an email and gave me a few sources to look at. So that's going to tie into this article, and we're going to look at a few other things as well. All right, so who is Joseph F. McConkie? If you don't know, okay, it says here, okay, it looks like he's deceased as of 2013. He was a professor of ancient scripture at BYU and an author or co-author of over 25 books. McConkie was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the son of Bruce R. McConkie. If you're new to the church, Bruce R. McConkie was he was an apostle, and he was like a scholar. He did a lot of work during his time as apostle, wrote really important books that are still referenced to this day, and many other things. He helped with the footnotes for the scriptures. So this is his son, okay? All right, so he says, the scriptures explicitly prohibit the speaking of the time of Christ's return in terms of the day and the hour. Although, I will say, and I've said it a billion times, Joseph Smith said that the prophet would know, because when Christ said that, he was talking about his own generation, that no one then would know the day or the hour, but of course he's going to reveal what he's going to do to the prophet before he does anything. So anyway, I'm not going to go over that again. I've already cited it like a million times. Okay, and then he continues. It is clear that the calendar we use is not to be one of months and years, but rather one of events. There are unconditional prophecies that must be fulfilled before Christ will return. These events are described in the scriptures as the quote-unquote finishing of his work. And they are to take place primarily, quote, in the beginning of the 7,000 years of the earth's temporal history, the preparing of the way before the time of his coming. D&C 77 verses 6 and 12. Let's just read that really quick. This is the question and answer section of D&C. And it says, question, what are we to understand by the book which John saw, which was sealed on the back with 7 seals? Answer, we are to understand that it contains the revealed will, mysteries, and the works of God, the hidden things of his economy concerning this earth during the 7,000 years of its continuance or its temporal existence. Verse 12, what are we to understand by the sounding of the trumpets mentioned in the 8th chapter of Revelation? Answer, we are to understand that as God made the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he finished his work and sanctified it, and also formed man out of the dust of the earth, even so in the beginning of the 7,000 years will the Lord sanctify the earth and complete the salvation of man and judge all things and shall redeem all things except that which he hath not put into his power, when he shall have sealed all things unto the end of all things. And the sounding of the trumpets of the 7 angels are the preparing and finishing of his work in the beginning of the 7,000 years, the preparing of the way before the time of his coming. And I know there's a lot of people with a lot of different interpretations of the seals and what seal are we in, what 1,000 years are we in right now. And I tend to go with the idea that we are in the 7th seal. That's why we're seeing this huge just uptick of things in this century right now, in this millennium, and more particularly since 2020, right? I'm not going to go into all that. If you think that we're in some other seal, that's fine, whatever. But anyway, okay, continuing on. In Revelation chapter 9, we read of the wars and plagues to be poured out during the 7th seal. By revelation, Joseph Smith told us that these things, quote, are to be accomplished after the opening of the 7th seal before the coming of Christ, end quote. The faithful saints can recognize these events and thus be prepared to receive Christ when he returns. See, we're supposed to be like we're supposed to be watching for these things. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, you shouldn't be watching for the signs of the time. We're commanded to do that, so that we recognize what's happening, so that we're ready, right? So that we're not caught off guard. Okay, so he says, let us briefly consider 6 key events, not necessarily in chronological order, that must be accomplished before the second coming. They are: 1, the preaching of the gospel in all the world. And we've been talking about that a lot lately, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more here, talk about some things that we haven't really talked about before. 2, the gathering of Israel, and we all know that that's President Nelson's big thing, is gathering scattered Israel. This is happening right now as we speak. And number 1, the preaching of the gospel in all the world. I've had a couple comments of people that have said that, like, an apostle on their mission told them that this has already been accomplished, and it's been strongly hinted at in general conference, especially with Elder Gong's talk about preaching the gospel to the end of the world, where he was in the southern tip of Argentina, at a place literally called the end of the world, and he saw the gospel being preached there, and he made a point of that. Anyway, number 3, the building of temples. Number 4, the appearance of Christ at Adam-ondi-Ahman. Number 5, the battle of Armageddon. And number 6, signs and wonders in the heavens. Okay, so he's starting with number 1, the preaching of the gospel in all the world. It is the destiny of the gospel, restored through the prophet Joseph Smith, to be preached among every nation, kindred, tongue, and people before Christ returns. Those of every nation, family, and language must have the opportunity to accept or reject Christ, as he is testified of in the Book of Mormon. 3 Nephi 21:11. Let's see. It says, therefore it shall come to pass that whosoever will not believe in my words, who am Jesus Christ, which the Father shall cause him to bring forth unto the Gentiles, and shall give unto him power that he shall bring them forth unto the Gentiles, it shall be done even as Moses said, they shall be cut off from among my people who are of the covenant. All right. Included are the peoples of Russia, China, India, and the Muslim nations. All are to be taught the restored gospel in their own language and by their own peoples. Which, I don't know where he gets this from, by their own peoples. After this, he quotes 2 scriptures. D&C 90 verse 11, it says, for it shall come to pass in that day that every man shall hear the fullness of the gospel in his own language, in his own tongue and in his own language, through those who are ordained unto this power by the administration of the Comforter, shed forth upon them from the revelation of Jesus Christ. So it does not say there that has to be by their own people. I'm not saying that he is wrong. It's just that these scriptures that he cites don't say that. Alma, chapter 29, verse 8, for behold, the Lord doth grant unto all nations of their own nation and tongue to teach his word. Maybe that's it. For the Lord doth grant unto all nations of their own nations of their own nation and tongue to teach his word, yea, in wisdom, all that he seeth fit that they should have. See, therefore we see that the Lord doth counsel in wisdom according to that which is just and true. So I don't know, maybe it kind of says that there, of their own nation and tongue. Yeah, I guess it does say it. And I think that that's been taking place anyway. You know, in Spain, we had Spaniards that were missionaries that were serving in Spain, and I don't think that's very uncommon. So anyway, not a big deal. Okay, what? I'm sorry, Brother McConkie. I'm sorry. Okay. In all these nations will be found congregations of Latter-day Saints, armed with righteousness and with power of God in great glory. Now, I will contend this. In all these nations will be found congregations, because what is the definition of a nation? Is it the political boundaries that the world currently recognizes, or Daniel was bringing up how, you know, excuse me, you have the Arabs that they've had, look, the modern attempts to at pan-Arab states, like they didn't necessarily choose the borders that they have. So could you include all of Islam, or all, not maybe not all of Islam, but like all the Arab countries as one country? Or do we go strictly by the borders that were drawn up in the aftermath of World War I and World War II after the British Mandate? I don't know. I don't know. Who knows what the Lord's definition is, if he's going by our definition of these nations, or if he's talking about a people broadly, the Arabs, the Persians, the so on and so forth. I don't know. I don't know. All right, let's go back here. Anyway, he quotes 1 Nephi 14, verses 12 and 14. And it came to pass that I beheld the church of the Lamb of God, and its numbers were few. There was somebody in the comments that pointed that out, that usually the people that argue that we still have such a long way to go never really mention this part where it says, and its numbers were few. Right? So right here, this is seeing the end. Nephi is seeing the end. The numbers are few. Right? And then it says, because of the wickedness and abominations of the whore who sat upon many waters, nevertheless, I beheld that the church of the Lamb, who were the saints of God, were also upon all the face of the earth. Okay, we're going to look at that in just a minute. And their dominions upon the face of the earth were small, because of the wickedness of the great whore whom I saw. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, beheld the power of the Lamb of God, that it descended upon the saints of the church of the Lamb, and upon the covenant people of the Lord, who were scattered upon all the face of the earth. And they were armed with righteousness and with the power of God in great glory. And that's a key phrase that's been brought up a couple times in the last couple conferences, especially by Elder Bednar. But anyway, it repeats here a couple times that the numbers are few, but that it is across the whole face of the earth. And we've already looked at this right here. This is the Meetinghouse locator. In each one of these red dots is a meeting house. Okay, and here's one in Egypt. Here's one in Kuwait. Here's a couple in Israel. There's a couple in Jordan, Lebanon. Let's see, Qatar, Bahrain. And I realize, I think the one in Bahrain is probably because I know that we have like a military presence there, so it may be because of that, but it's still there. You think that people working on base or on the installation don't come across or rub shoulders with Latter-day Saints. And then we have United Arab Emirates, where our first Middle Eastern temple is going to go in. It looks like they have 1, 2, 3, 4 meeting houses there. We got one in Oman, none in Saudi Arabia. Come over here. Daniel said that there was one in Morocco, that there's a congregation there, but it's not, the meeting house isn't showing up on this map. I don't know how long it takes for it to update. Who knows? Senegal. There's a lot of, Senegal is, if I remember right from my mission, it's mostly a Muslim nation. Is Senegal a Muslim country? Yeah, 95.9% is Muslim in Senegal, and yet there it is right there. Okay, we just opened up Gambia. The Gambia just opened up. No one cared about the Gambia when I spoke about that. This is like a few months ago, that it was dedicated for missionary work. That's happening now. Mali is also primarily a Muslim nation. So anyway, it's happening. If you were to like go to somebody from a long time ago, say Old Testament times, let's say someone from Old Testament times, and you were to show them this map, do you think that they would say, oh wow, the Church of the Lamb is all across the world? I think that they probably would. Look at this. Look at Pakistan, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't even know that. Look at Pakistan. India has a bunch, and they're getting a temple, by the way. I think we're doing pretty darn good. And since the time that this article was written in 1980, what was it, 1985? Uh, Now we have all these congregations and a temple that's going to be going into Russia and Ukraine and all the former satellite states of the Soviet Union. Right here's another. There's another map that we can look at. This is stakes. Okay, so what we're looking at here is stakes, and it's basically the same. There's a stake in Pakistan. There's a few stakes. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, Sri Lanka is a separate country. I think it's not part of India, but still, I'm going to count it as part of India just because it's very similar. But I know it's a different country. I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Between India and Sri Lanka, there are 7 stakes. And then there's a bunch here in Southeast Asia. That's the Philippines. That's one of our main places. And we have some stakes here in Brunei. I'm not sure. Which I wonder if Brunei is a Muslim nation, because I know Indonesia is. Indonesia is a big Muslim nation. It's the largest Muslim nation in the world, as a matter of fact. Let's see, is Brunei a Muslim country? Brunei's population is predominantly Sunni Muslim. Yeah, look at that. See that? I didn't know that till just now. So this primarily Muslim country has stakes that are there. What is this? I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is part of Indonesia. I'm not sure. Anyway, there's one in Malaysia. You guys, I mean, come on with it. Okay, and we've talked about how many people. I went through that whole thing about like all these people that have talked about Chinese exchange students coming to the United States and converting while they're here. And that happens probably with all these different countries. There's a lot of people from these Muslim countries that come to the United States for various reasons, or to Europe. So I think we need to maybe just think a little bit outside the box and go beyond just, oh no, it has to go to every single doorstep. It has to be in literally inside every one of these political borders. I don't think that's right. I don't at all, especially given the fact that a couple of you have said that this has already been completed according to the apostle that spoke to you when you were on your mission. So, all right, let's go back here. Let's move on. Now, to be fair, maybe back then that's what the brethren expected or thought. Because in 1985, for example, I don't think anyone really saw the internet coming. The internet was actually, I think it was around by that time, but it was still only being used by like universities and DARPA, I think. When did the internet start? No, I'm not looking for the watershed year. I'm looking for okay, a brief history of the internet, University System of Georgia. It says here, the internet started in the 1960s as a way for government researchers to share information. Okay, so it was around by that time, but like it says here, an internet history timeline from the 60s to now. Oh, it says right there in the title. It wasn't really until the mid-90s that it started to kind of make its way into people's homes. And that's around the time that I remember it, because my dad was a software engineer. He ended up working for the church. And that's what he was doing when he passed away. He was an employee of the church. But so he was an early adopter of computer stuff. And I remember being on that ancient internet with the with the modem dial-up and not being able to be on the phone and the internet at the same time, and uh, browsers like Netscape, and I think for a while my dad had CompuServe. Um, back in those days when AOL would send would mail everybody like their discs, so that they could get AOL. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the internet wasn't on their minds at that time because it was still just like only being used by the government and stuff like that. So I'm going to be fair to Joseph F. McConkie, because maybe if he was here now, maybe he'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, stuff has definitely changed. So I'm going to give him a break. This is 1985. Okay, number 2, the gathering of Israel. Through the teaching of the gospel, the prophecies about the gathering of Israel will be fulfilled. This applies to Lamanite, Jew, or those of the lost tribes alike. And just as a side note, I don't know why they never mention Nephites, because we know it's been said that the Polynesians are descended from Hagoth, and Hagoth was a Nephite. You remember that story? Let's see. Hagoth, Book of Mormon. According to the Book of Mormon, Hagoth was a Nephite shipbuilder who lived in or around 55 BCE. At least 2 of the ships he built were lost. The occupants of one ship were presumed drowned. And this video is not about Hagoth, but the people in, look right here, Polynesian theory, and I don't think it's so much a theory, it's been stated like prophetically that the people of like New Zealand, Tonga, Samoa, and others, that they're descended from Hagoth, so they're Nephites. So I'm just going to add that in here. This applies to Nephite, Lamanite, Jew, or those of the lost tribes alike. All were lost or scattered because they rejected Christ and his laws. They will have claim again upon their ancient inheritances when they have returned to Christ and his everlasting covenants. After they had been restored to the true church and full of God, they will return under the direction of the prophet who holds the keys of the gathering of Israel to the lands of their inheritance. Yes. Oh, I forgot to go over the Muslim dreams up here under number 1, the preaching of the gospel in all the world. Because again, I'm not so sure that in every single case it has to be mortal missionaries that are doing it, or at least like non-translated missionaries that are doing it. My last video was about presumably one of the 3 Nephites that he was operating. He was going around and preaching, and he had success in starting a congregation and then sending them to Colorado, where they joined the church. So I've talked a lot about that in regards to Native Americans, and then we have this case where well, at that time I guess you wouldn't call them settlers, but people in Tennessee, and then I've talked about the possibility of Messianic Jews that are having this experience. And now, look at this. He sent me a couple websites to look at, and I've actually been wanting to go through this because I had heard this somewhere before. Let me just read a little bit about this. This is from the Christian Post, and I'm going to go ahead and give them the benefit of a doubt that these are accurate stories. Of course, it'll be up to you to discern and determine. But it says, Jesus appeared to Middle Eastern Muslim every night, recited entire Gospel of John. God is moving. Here's a little cartoon to go along with it. Okay, let's see. A church planter working in the Middle East has shared the miraculous ways the gospel is moving across the persecuted region, including how Jesus appeared to a Muslim man every night for weeks, reciting to him the entire Gospel of John. As part of the Gospel Coalition's Something Needs to Change event, held Wednesday night, David Platt, author and pastor of McLean Bible Church, held an interview with a missionary identified only as Yazim. Quote, he lives and works in a part of the Middle East where not only is it illegal to share the gospel, it's life-threatening to talk about how the gospel is advancing. End quote. Speaking via simulcast with a disguised voice, Yazim began by stating, quote, God is moving inside the Middle East with dreams, visions, and personal visitations. End quote. He shared the story of a man who lived about 50 kilometers outside of an unnamed Middle Eastern city known for vast opium use. Whenever I think about that, that makes me think of Afghanistan. But okay, quote, this man said this to us when we visited him. A man wearing all white knocked on my door every night, and I couldn't look at him because his face was so shiny and bright. Now, this is interesting because, again, this is something that we see time and time again in the scriptures when someone is either resurrected or transfigured. Their face gets shiny and bright. Actually, I was talking about this on my members only portion of the channel because like there's an interesting thing going on with the secret combinations that I think may be in reference to this. But anyway, Yazim recalled, quote, when he would come inside, he asked me to write down what he said. As I wrote, I fell asleep. The next night, he would come again. For the next month, Yazim asked the man, what did you write? May I see your notebook? The man showed Yazim his notebook. In it is written, quote, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. The opening portion of the New Testament book of John. Quote, he had the whole book of John verbatim in his notebook. Jesus visited him every night until he finished the book. The amazing thing is, the man actually asked us, who was this man that visited me? I learned a valuable lesson. God will do his part, but we still have to do ours. Platt revealed that Yazim's own conversion story is miraculous. His wife was a devout Muslim who profoundly depressed by the demands of Islam, decided to take her own life. However, that very night, she heard the gospel for the first time and dedicated her life to Jesus. Following that event, she and her husband decided to stay in their homeland and dedicate their lives to sharing the gospel despite the risks. Quote, our focus is to make disciples who then start new churches. We believe that God commanded us to do. We believe that what God commanded us to do is Matthew 28. We believe that if you make disciples, churches will grow. Okay, so I'm going to end that here for this article. You can read the rest if you'd like. And I want to remind you that I think that the Lord will work with groups in phases, right? I think that because in the story of the Seneca prophet of the Iroquois, there was a chief, and he wasn't like explicitly told to go and find Joseph Smith and get baptized, like had happened before with other Native American peoples. But in his case, it's like he was introduced a lot of the basics of the gospel. And one thing that specifically corresponds with our church is how he was taught to not drink alcohol, that everyone should stop drinking alcohol. I've done a video about that. Just look up Seneca, Seneca, on my channel, and you'll find that story. So, in other words, with the Seneca people, with the Messianic Jews, with the Muslims, it may be that the first phase for this group, as we approach the second coming, is simply to do the basics. And in the case of the Jews and the Muslims, simply to accept that Christ is Christ, that Jesus is the Christ. I want to read you something interesting from a general conference. This is, April 2009, Elder Quentin L. Cook. It's called Our Father's Plan, Big Enough for All His Children. And he says here, this is something that always stuck with me. Oh, yeah, and then I lose it. Sorry, I should have zoomed into the right thing. Gosh dang it. Let me just look for the highlight in yellow. I know it's here somewhere. There it is. Okay, this is what he said in 2009. This always stuck with me. After all, the Savior has suffered for mankind. It is not surprising that in speaking of existing churches in the first vision, he would instruct Joseph to, quote, Join none of them, for they are all wrong. The Savior subsequently ushered in the restoration of his true doctrine with respect to the plan of salvation and other saving principles, such as the doctrine of Christ. But notwithstanding the significance of our doctrinal differences with other faiths, our attitude toward other churches has been to refrain from criticism. They do much good. They bless mankind. Many help their members learn of the Savior and his teachings. So think about that. How, yes, the other churches are missing really fundamental things that we only have in this church. They don't have the complete truth. They don't have priesthood power. They don't have the authority to perform the ordinances of the gospel. They are still able to do the work of the Lord in a limited sense. They can bring people to a knowledge of Christ. Because if you're someone in this life, you start out in some other religion or an atheist family or whatever, you can come to a knowledge of Christ and his mission by coming in contact with one of these other Christian denominations. Now, of course, the goal ultimately would be to find the true church, receive the saving ordinances, and get on the covenant path. But they can act as a stepping stone toward getting to that path, if that makes sense. And so, even though these people that are having these experiences in the Middle East are simply accepting Christ, and they're kind of like starting their own congregations with the support of other Christian churches from outside the Middle East. It's a step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction. I want to read a little bit more. This is from CBN News. This is like a big like Christian kind of like media company. I'm sure you've seen them before. I recognize this logo, the CBM with like the little flame inside. Okay. Sorry, this is from this year, April 28th of this year. What was it? Let me see. When was this one written? Does it say? No, it doesn't say. So I don't know when this other one was. Oh, wait, here we go. This was 2019. Interesting because, this is during President Nelson's presidency. Now, this one's even more recent. Muslims having visions of Jesus during Ramadan. A man in white robe comes to them. Oh, by the way, it's not clear in this story, this first article that we read, if it was in fact Christ. We don't know. I think that might be an assumption on the part of who he's telling the story to. What if that person in a white robe was actually one of the three Nephites or John, the Revelator? Now, in this article I'm about to read, he is identified as Christ, so, okay. But that may not be the case with the previous one, or with if you could collect all these stories. I have no doubt that some of them are either the three Nephites and or John the Revelator. Okay, as the Islamic holy month of Ramadan is nearing an end, Muslims have been praying and fasting with fervor, building up to the quote, night of destiny, when they seek a spiritual breakthrough. This year, that quote unquote night of power falls on April 28th, tonight. Millions of Christians around the globe are also interceding on their behalf. Uncharted Ministries has interviewed former Muslims who now follow Jesus, and many of them had supernatural encounters with Jesus during Ramadan. These former Muslims are sharing their stories of discovering Jesus as their savior and praying that others will have the same experience. Hussein tells Uncharted Ministries that he was once a devout Muslim and extremely anti-Christian. But one year during the week of Easter, Hussein saw a Christian preacher on TV talking all about Jesus. He could not take his eyes off the broadcast, and then something supernatural happened to him. Quote, suddenly, the Holy Ghost fell on me. I looked up and Jesus was there in front of me. I'd been a devout Muslim, but as soon as I saw him, it was like seeing an old friend that I knew before. And I knew it was Jesus, and I knew something else. I knew that he was the Son of God. Now, that's very interesting, an interesting way of saying that it felt like he was an old friend that he knew before, because as a matter of fact, uh, within our church, we know that there was a pre-existence, and we do know him from before. It's going to be interesting when he actually comes for the second coming. Are we going to have that same kind of experience? Is he going to, like, when we see his face, is it going to trigger our pre-mortal memory? Which I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Okay, many other Muslims are telling their stories now too at ifoundthetruth.com, like Marzia from Iran. Okay, and actually, I pulled that up. It's right here. This is really cool. I actually want to watch this later, but that's all that this site is. It's Muslims that have found Christ. There's season 3, season 2, season 1. So you have Yasra's story, Afshin's story, Hussein's story, Tyree's story. That's season 1. Al-Fadi's story, Hormoz's story, the Baghdad boys, Susan's story, Nadine's story. Anyway, you get the idea. So here's a website where you're actually hearing these stories of these people believing in Christ, right? So I would invite you to check this out and just give it a look. I think that's fascinating. Let's go back here. Okay, Aisha, Nadine, Afshin, and Yasra are just a few of the others who also talk about growing up Muslim before finding the truth of Jesus Christ. Their amazing testimonies can be seen on I Found the Truth website. Yasser says she came to realize after encountering Jesus Christ, quote, "He's not a mad, angry God who created me. He's not that. He created me with so much love," end quote. Tom Doyle of Uncharted Ministries says during this season, Muslim background believers are praying not just for Muslims, but for Christians to learn how to share the gospel with them. Why is it important to do this during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan? Doyle says, quote, "The last week is the most special week because it is the night Muslims call the night of destiny." Yeah, so that's, the night of power where they just cry out to God. That is the number one night of the year that Jesus appears to Muslims in dreams. They're searching for God, and Jesus accommodates that request. But they're shocked and they're surprised when a man in a white robe comes to them and tells them that he loves them and he died for them on the cross. So it would seem that in some of these cases, it is Christ. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some where it's the three Nephites and or John. So let's see. Was I going to read this one? I'm not going to read this one because it's too much reading already. But here's another website. Lausanne World Pulse Archives. This is from 2007. More than dreams, Muslims coming to Christ through dreams and visions. So it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder just how far along we are. And I would imagine that these people that are having these dreams and visions are being prepped for the second coming when we're going to have the greatest need for missionaries. Okay? Because do they have to do it now? Do they have to do it now? No, I don't think so. The genuine, good, upright people of the world, and they probably are good, genuine, upright people because they're having these experiences and are worthy of it due to how they're living their lives. Most likely, when Christ comes, they're going to be part of the group that joins the church once he identifies himself with this church. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, number 3, the building of temples. As Israel is gathered, Zion will be established, and as Zion is established, temples will be built. And by the way, I just want to say, most of the time when they're talking about building up Zion, they're talking about building up the stakes of Zion all across the world. I just want to point that out, although I do know that the center place will be built at some point. And like I've pointed out before, we already have a temple in waiting there in the Independence Visitor Center. And we have a stake center that's right there. And if they move forward with the original plans for the city, it's going to be a city of 15,000 to 20,000 people in a square, a grid. And a stake is a city and a city is a stake. So it seems like it's already ready to go, with the exception of the other 23 temples, which I presume will eventually be built. Anyway, temples have as their purpose to prepare people to meet God. Malachi promised that in the last days the Lord would suddenly come to his temple. Isaiah identified temple building as a sign of the gathering of Israel, preparatory to the coming of Christ. So, with that sentence, Isaiah is saying that temple building is a sign of the gathering of Christ. And with all the temples that have been announced and that seem like they're going to, the more that are going to be announced in this next general conference and so on into the future, what does that tell you about how close we are to the second coming? I think we're getting pretty close. Prophetic promises include the building of temples in both the Jerusalem of old and the New Jerusalem of Jackson County. Check, I would say, check with the New Jerusalem. As far as Jerusalem of old, I tend to think that they're gonna succeed in building the third temple, and maybe that's what's going to cause Armageddon. I don't know. I've explored the possibility of the BYU Jerusalem Center, not against the Israeli government, because the church would not go against the Israeli government. They would honor what they've said, but the Lord may have other plans for the BYU Jerusalem Center. It may not happen till the actual second coming, but it could be turned into a temple, and not the type of temple that we use right now, but more of like maybe a administration building or something like that. Okay, number 4, the appearance of Christ at Adam-ondi-Ahman. Before the great and dreadful day when Christ will come both to claim his own and to bring judgment upon the wicked before he descends openly and publicly, he will appear privately and quietly to some of the faithful saints of all ages in the valley of Adam-ondi-Ahman. See, right here he's saying some of the faithful saints. I'm still not sure what to think, because there are some quotes that seem to suggest that all righteous saints will be there. And I don't know if that's what he's talking about here, righteous saints, because you have saints that are righteous and then you have other saints that are tares or not quite there. So I still don't know really what to make of this. But I think we'll have to explore that in another thing. Maybe I'll do some kind of tracker for who's going to be hit there and who's not. Anyway, of all ages in the valley of Adam-ondi-Ahman. Here, those who have held keys and powers from the time of Adam to the present will account for their stewardships. They will return their keys to Adam, who in turn will return all keys to Christ, and will thus be readied for Christ to commence his millennial reign. This is another thing I'm not too sure about, because even though the keys will be returned, I would imagine that the church would still operate. It's not like, okay, President Nelson, you're done now. Go ahead and go home. I'm pretty sure that he would still operate the same way, but just under the keys of Christ, right? I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of it, but I'm not so sure that because we still have bishops and because we still have the prophet doing his duties, that necessarily, that means that Adam-ondi-Ahman hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure. Number 5, the Battle of Armageddon. When Israel has returned to her land, having come from all the nations of the earth, and the old Jerusalem has been rebuilt with the temple of the Lord, excuse me, then will come a time of great wickedness and destruction, which will culminate in the Battle of Armageddon. So he's saying that the temple has to be built first. I guess that makes sense. They are getting very, very close. They're just like, they're chomping at the bit to build that temple. And again, if something happens to where they do it, I think that's going to create a lot of anger in the region, because right now they're heart set on building that temple on the Temple Mount where the Dome of the Rock is, because that's where there's this special stone or kind of like bedrock that's poking up, and that's where they believe the Holy of Holies has to go. So anyway, continuing on, it has been falsely supposed that it will be a state of righteousness that ushers in the millennial era. Such is not the case. The whole world will be wallowing in wickedness. 2 of God's prophets will be slain in Jerusalem, and their bodies will lie in the street for 3.5 days before God brings them forth from the dead. According to divine providence, Jerusalem's tribulations will parallel her sins. The city will be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. It appears that only the righteous will escape this destruction and depredation. Such is the setting of the last great battle, the Battle of Armageddon. This culminating battle is a religious war, a war which pits the cause of Israel and their Christ against the forces of Gog and Magog. Will be waged on the plain of Esdraelon in the ancient land of Palestine. According to Revelation 9:16, here some, quote, 200,000, that is 200 million men and more, will be involved in a battle which will embrace and extend to all the nations of the earth. During this battle, Christ will place his foot again upon the Mount of Olives, and the sacred mountain will split in twain. He will rescue his people and stand in judgment of the wicked. The defeat of Gog and Magog will represent the final destruction of the enemies of Israel and the end of the earthly nations and kingdoms. Soon thereafter, Christ will reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, 200 million, that is quite a bit, I must say. That's larger than a lot of places. I don't know. Sometimes I don't really like to get into the nitty gritty of these type of things because, again, you can read things literally, or the way that it's stated, it could be one of those things where in Jewish writing they're using numbers as symbols and representations of things, simply to say, for example, it's going to be a huge battle. It's just going to be huge. That could be all that it means, or it could literally mean 200 million people will actually be there. So I don't know. I don't know. It's not so much a stretch to believe that there could be 200 million involved in the war. The war, but as far as like a battle is smaller than a war. Okay, let me see how many combatants during World War II. I don't know if I'm going to get that number. Oh, wait. Go back here. The Second World War pitted 2 alliances against each other, the Axis powers and the Allied powers. The Soviet Union served 35 million men and women. The U.S. serving 16 million. Germany 13, British Empire 8.5, Japan 6 million. It is estimated that a total 127 million people were mobilized during the war. Okay, so if it's a literal number, then it would be on the scale of World War II. It would be obviously be more than that. It'd be like more than, well, no, it'd be more than that. But to have that many in a single battle in a small geographic area like that, I find that highly unlikely. Because isn't that that's what he's saying? He's talking about the Battle of Armageddon. Yeah, the last great battle. Okay, on the plain of Esdraelon, 200 million people. That's like taking more than everybody that served in World War II on both sides. If you were to take all those soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, whatever, you took them all and you put them all in a valley for a final battle. That is epic. the proportions of that is epic. And I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I'm not so sure it's literal. It could be. I guess we'll see. Anyway, okay, that's where he'll assume his position as King of King, Lord of Lords. So it's like he receives the priesthood keys at Adam-ondi-Ahman, and that's part of the preparation of him becoming the King of Kings and commencing his millennial reign. But then it's like, as far as the worldly powers go, it seems like that doesn't really take place until he appears to the Jews and sets foot on the Mount of Olives. Okay, number 6, signs and wonders in the heavens. Some 2,000 years earlier, while on the Mount of Olives, Christ had told his disciples of the destructions that would come again upon Israel in the last days. He then promised, quote, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Again, President Hinckley declared that this has already taken place. This has already taken place. And note that it's after the tribulation of those days. So we really are just at the end of this process. Should I pull that up? Yes. Let me see if I can find it really quick, because there's going to be someone that's like, what? No, it still has to happen. It still has to happen. Okay, let's see. Okay, prophecy fulfilled. I put together like this big presentation. It's called, the name of the video is When General Conference Declares Prophecy is Fulfilled. And they have done it many, 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 many times.
To go to Missouri.
And one of them is President Hinckley. It's probably this one right here. Well, it could be 2005. Let's pull it up. See, moon. No, must not be that one. Maybe it was 2001. Let's take a look. I just mentioned this the other day. Moon. Yeah, here it is. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And he says up here, the vision of Joel has been fulfilled. Right here. Okay. So all this stuff with I will shew wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance. And the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. That's been completed. It's done. Okay. Now, again, to the credit of Joseph F. McConkie, this had not happened yet, because this is in 1985, and President Hinckley said this in October 2001 General Conference. All right. So keep that in mind. Okay, moving on. This is the last part of it. This then is the final great sign, for then, he promised, quote, shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So, so there you have it. And I think that this is in reference to the final appearance. Like, that seems to be the way that he puts it here. That first he comes to the Mount of Olives, and then after that is when you have. Well, no, he said it's not necessarily in chronology, but yeah, that's how it happens. First, Adam-ondi-Ahman, we know he's going to show up at New Jerusalem. He's going to appear at the Mount of Olives, and it seems like there's going to be the final appearance just to the entire world when all the tribes of the earth mourn and see this. So, anyway, So there's that. It seems like we've come a long way since this article was written, October 1985, but it's really good to review. And thank you, Daniel, for sharing your information with us about the Muslims that are having these experiences, you know, as late as this year, 2022. And I assume that it would just continue. Um, the rest of the email here, he just kind of talks about the fact that we've had missionaries already in the early days of the church that have gone to the Middle East, they've gone to China, they've gone to all these places that are now inaccessible. So, and that was part of this dispensation. So you could say that missionaries have already been there. But on top of that, we have people that are immigrating, we have refugees that are trying to find refuge in other countries. We have the internet that's now in operation, and we have people on the channel that say that there are apostles that have said that this is complete. So I'm not waiting really for this to be quote unquote complete. I trust that we're there. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it. And if you haven't already, consider joining the members only portion of the channel where we discuss other topics. And I'll talk to you guys later.